Hello, hey, it's Derek here again. Mindset of Happiness and Joy, week number 4. Real excited to be here again for another installment of the Mindset of Happiness and Joy. As we're getting an audience coming around here, I want to make a little bit of an announcement. This Monday, Monday the February 13th, I will be doing 2 classes on how this understanding applies to relationships. They're called the Effortless Relationship. And for those of you who would like to attend, it's going to be on what's called the Zoom platform. And it is going to be a webinar. And just go ahead and click email me on the Happiness and Joy webpage. And I will be able to send you that contact information on how to join that particular meeting that we're going to be having on Monday the 13th. So, today we're going to be talking about feelings, how the thought and feelings work together, and how the understanding of where our feelings come from and what do our feelings and our moods are telling us. And we're going to kind of go into a greater detail about that. So as we go through there, if you have any comments or questions, go ahead and just type them in, and I'll try to do my best to answer them on this type of a situation, because it is kind of fun. You know, we only have communication one way, really, other than your chats and your comments. But in this understanding, one of the things that I love about it is it's the simplicity of it. And I call it going beyond the how-to. In my business of coaching and helping people, I run into a lot of people who just want techniques and strategies, the how-to. What do I need to do to have a happy life? What do I need to do to make money? What do I need to do to have a better relationship? What do I need to do to improve my health? And I just want strategies. I want techniques. I want the how-to. Just give me a step program, something that I can follow. And there is some benefit to having steps and having kind of guidelines to go by. But if you don't understand the fundamental truths, the fundamental principles behind what it is that you want, it kind of falls flat. And it really doesn't give much attraction to doing it. And so when I work with people, I really just focus on what are the fundamental truths, what are the principles that we operate. And the main principles that we start with is how do we experience life as a human being? What are the fundamental principles behind that? And in the previous classes we've touched on them, but I'll just kind of go over them real quick again, is that there is assumption that basically the fundamental truth that we have is as a human beings, we are all alive, we all are aware, and we all think. And because we are alive and we are aware and we think, that is how we experience life through those 3 fundamental truths. And this understanding, which we call the 3 principles, those principles of those facts are represented in what's called mind, consciousness, and thought. And again, mind is where the energy, where's the life force of us being alive comes from. And because we are alive, we are given innate gifts. We have gifts that are a part of our nature, of who we are as a human being. That they are the mindset of happiness and joy. Hi, I see Ivy and Jesse are here, so thanks for showing up. But again, this understanding that we're alive, that we have innate gifts. So the formula that I put out earlier was that our well-being, our psychological well-being, is innate. It's something that we don't have to go out and seek. In other words, the ability to be happy, the ability to have resilience, clarity of mind, peace of heart, those wonderful gifts. And if you're having a hard time figuring out those gifts, look at small children. They have them naturally. I've never seen an insecure 2-year-old. I've seen them throw tantrums, but their core ability to have confidence, their core ability to be courageous, their ability to have resilience, to be able just to snap out of all the little things, their ability to learn. I mean, those are wonderful gifts that every young child and every parent who's had a young child can see. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, give me some little thumbs up or something saying if you agree with me on that one, especially those who have young children, you understand that. But we have that as a human being innate in us. And we don't lose those. And we really can't gain them because they're gifts. And the only thing that keeps us from that sense of happiness, that sense of psychological well-being, is the fact that we have misunderstandings. And the biggest misunderstanding that we have is that circumstance dictates my well-being. In other words, that it's an outside-in world, not an inside-out world. And we've kind of gotten into a society where we look at circumstances as the source of our well-being. Either if I design circumstances, I'll have a sense of well-being, or if I can avoid these circumstances, then somehow I'll keep my well-being. But there's just this beautiful place here that when we realize that circumstance can either give me or take away my innate well-beingness of who I am as a human being, that being of love, the being of kindness, the connection that we have with other human beings, the resilience, the ability to overcome, there's a certain amount of freedom that opens up to us. And one of the misunderstandings that I lived for a number of years was thinking that somehow I could design a wonderful life. I could manipulate my circumstances, I could manipulate my thinking so that I can have a wonderful life. And that fundamentally was kind of a misunderstanding, and it was an innocent misunderstanding, because it's really interesting to see how the illusion that circumstance causes my well-being is very prevalent in society. Now, I'm not saying that we can just ignore circumstance and that circumstance isn't important, but what I'm saying is that your feelings, how you experience the circumstance isn't the circumstance itself. It's the experience of thought in the moment that gives you the circumstance. I know that's kind of may sound a little bit different, but there is a little thing called correlation and causation. Just because things correlate doesn't mean there's a causation to it. For instance, in the 1800s, I mentioned this before, a lot of the predominant doctors at the time really believed that bad smells caused illness. And there was a correlation between bad smells and illness. I don't know about you, but when I've been around people who are sick, they do kind of put off an odor. There is a little bit of a smell there. And so I can see how a doctor could innocently think that the smell was causing the disease. But as germ theory comes out and we understood about germs, we understood that the actual smell is the chemical reaction that the germs and the bacteria are making. Not the smell itself's not causing the disease. The smell is just an indicator that there are some germs present. You know, it's like when you take your milk out that's been expired for about a week or two and you have that little nice smell. That smell's telling you that, yeah, some bacteria and some gunk's in there that you probably shouldn't drink it. So in the same concept, circumstance really illusionally looks like it's causing my feelings. It's causing my well-being, or it's taking away from my well-being. But when you understand that it is just a trick of the mind, it's a real great illusion. And it's kind of like the best magic trick there is. So the way that I would look at it, and I'll probably do a little whiteboard presentation later on and post that later on today, but most people think circumstance equals my experience. And that's not true. It's circumstance happens. And we can't control circumstance. It's going to happen. Life's a contact sport. We're going to get bumped. We're going to have things that are going to happen that we're not going to enjoy. And if you live in a paradigm of outside in, that you think that it's the circumstance that's causing your experience, the implications of that is that you're probably going to do a lot of little things to protect yourself against that circumstance. But when you understand that the circumstance itself is neutral, what gives it power is the principle of thought in the moment. So what I'm saying is that circumstance doesn't give you your experience. It's the principle that 100% of your experience comes from the principle of thought in the moment. So it's the power of thought that gives us the experience. It's not the circumstance. I'm going to illustrate that, there's a great book out there. It's by a lady named Marilyn Bowman, and it's called The Individual Differences of Post-Traumatic Response. And she basically talks a little bit about how the idea that experience, in other words, a traumatic event, actually causes a person's response. And I'm just going to, rather than try to paraphrase what she says, I'm just going to read the first few paragraphs of the first chapter in that book. And because I can't do anything better than what she reads. So I'm going to go ahead and try to read this, and I forgot my reading glasses, so bear with me. She says, a striking scene was observed on the seashore in August, in which a man and a woman wept and laminated loudly as a result of what happened. They knew they were forever damned and doomed. In another setting, two little children burst into tears when a man was killed by a gunshot close by. In yet another situation, a man described a certain 3 decades of his life as having been fun. I am filled with gratitude for the friends and the adventure, the love, the learning, the excitement, the sheer fun of those years. Which of these people had been subject to a toxic event, and what was their nature? The man and the woman, expressing powerful despair, had tried to feed themselves to sharks at the mouth of the Hugh River in India in 1640 because they were devout Hindus of a sect who believed this sacrifice was to their spiritual benefit. When they found the already sated sharks unwilling to eat them, they concluded that they had been found unworthy because they had been too sinful to have their sacrifice accepted, and wailed at their ill luck of not being eaten. In the second case, the children were crying because they had been unable to see the prisoner being executed by the soldiers. They became quietly content when their father, a Chinese warlord in 1920s, held them up so they could see all they wanted of the gory details of the dying man's suffering in the murder. In the final case, the man was Sidney Rittenberg, a young American soldier who stayed in China after World War II. He was describing a period that included 2 extended imprisonments, totaling more than 15 years in solitary confinement in harsh prisons during that turbulent political and military events of that era. I love that part because it really does illustrate that the circumstance is neutral. It's the thinking around the circumstance, the power of the principle of thought, that gives the person the experience. So when a circumstance happens, we have certain lenses that we're going to look at that experience through. The lenses that people call beliefs, experiences ourselves. But those experiences, those lenses, are actually just a representation of thought, of the principle of thought. So circumstance happens, we have some thinking and put some thought about that circumstance dependent upon the lenses of thought that we have on at the time. And when we have those thoughts, that leads us to a feeling. And those feelings could be positive, negative, whatever those feelings are. And then those feelings then lead to a behavior. So a simple way of putting it is that feelings are basically, we feel what we think. So feelings is just a barometer. It's just a measuring stick of where our thinking is in that moment. To kind of illustrate this, and why this is important to understand is do an experiment. I want you to take your arm and grab it and do kind of one of those Indian burns. You remember those in second grade. And as you do that Indian burn, there's going to be a time where your physical body says, that's too tight. That's enough. You need to back off. And it's kind of our pain receptors. It's the same concept. If we slowly put our hand towards a heat source, like an oven burner or a candle, that warmth tells our body we need to pull back because we're going to get physically hurt. So feelings don't tell you anything other than where your thinking is in the moment. So in my past, when I was under the paradigm that life was an outside-in life, I was really scared of feelings. I was really scared of that depression. I was really scared of that emotion. And I did everything to protect myself against feeling bad. And as I started to understand a little bit deeper about the fundamental principles of how we experience life, I realized that feelings, they're actually just your natural innate warning symbol, warning system, telling you where your thinking is in the moment. So when I'm feeling happy, when I'm feeling joyful, when I'm feeling at peace, those feelings are just telling me that my thinking is more in a natural state, that I'm in my innate natural state of a human being, in my well-being. And when I start feeling feelings of depression and anxiety and frustration and anger, they're not telling me about the circumstance. They're not telling me about what went on in the past. They're not giving me any clues on what's going to happen in the future. All those feelings are doing is telling me where my thinking is in that moment. And just like the little Indian burn, or just like the touching that hot stove, it's just a warning signal that tells me your thinking's getting off track. You need to back off. What does that sound? I mean, how does that resonate to you? To know that you don't have to be afraid of your feelings, that feelings are telling you something. They're telling you where your thinking is in the moment. That's all they can tell you. See, one of the biggest misunderstandings that is innocently put in, especially in the psychologists and the development people, is that they say that past experience somehow causes your turmoil or your frustration. It's not the experience. It's not the circumstance. It's the thought. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not things that have happened in your past that made you frustrated. I know that there's things in my past that I can say caused me certain feelings. But in reality, they were just circumstances. And how I represented those circumstances through the principle of thought, that's what gave me my experience. And since we talked about last week about the nature of thought and how thought changes, that thought isn't something that is permanent. It's free-flowing. So what happens now is that when I have those frustration feelings, it's not telling me anything other than thought in the moment. And so when I have that frustration, when I'm having that angst, then I can go, oh, my thinking is getting contaminated. And in the past, I would say, well, my thinking's contaminated. I've got to do something to change my thinking. But because I understand the principle of thought, that I don't have to change my thoughts. Thoughts change naturally. See, we can't keep a thought in our mind for any length of time. It's going to naturally move. And we can see that in really young children. A little child can go from an extreme temper tantrum, I hate you, I don't want to ever see you again, and in a split second, their thought can change. And they're back to love, they're back to peace, and they're back to being okay. Now, for me, that gave just a wonderful understanding about really I no longer had the fear of feelings. I didn't have to fear my experience because it's just letting me know where my thinking is. Does that make any sense to you? Is it resonating? I hope it is. And maybe to illustrate it a little bit more, I'll give you an experience. A simple one. If I think of an outside-in situation, and I think that circumstance actually causes my experience, the implications of that is that, again, I have to navigate my life. So I have a wonderful woman in my life. I love her to death, and we spend a lot of time together. We really enjoy one another. However, she has long hair, and she sheds. And sometimes that hair just gets everywhere, and I'm picking hairs off me. And in the moments that I think that those hairs are the cause of my irritation, and it's because of those hairs and because of her that I'm irritated because I have to pull hairs off me, my experience of her is different than when I realize that, oh no, it's not the hairs, it's not her that's causing my experience of irritation, it's my thinking in the moment. And now, when sometimes I get a little hair on me, instead of thinking of it as an irritant that's caused by her, I know that it's my own thinking if I'm irritated. And then I find myself just naturally going, oh, it's just a hair, pull it off, and I'm done. There's no emotional anything about it. That's just part of life. Now that's simplistic, but it actually works on a higher level. And you can take almost any issue that's a large, important issue, an important circumstance, and when you see it, that the circumstance isn't giving you your experience, that it's the thought in the moment that gives you the experience. There's just a subtle change that happens. Another personal experience that I had is that when I was young, when I was, I believe it would have been 8th grade, I was really a small kid, so I got picked on a lot, and so I was bullied. And there was 3 kids in my school at that time that were just relentless. I mean, they would throw me in lockers, push me around, put me in garbage cans, and were constantly being bullies. And guess what? I, in an outside-in world, looked at that bullying as they were causing my distress. They were causing my pain. And into the outside world, you'd look at it and you could say, yeah, they did. They caused pain. But if you look at it as an outside-in, and you think that that outside experience is going to take away a person's well-being, you're going to look at it a little bit differently. But when you know that that well-being is inside you and you can't not be taken away from experience, you'll look at it also in a different way. So from my experience, I came to my mom and I talked to her. I said, you know, I'm getting these guys are just bullying me. And my mother did something that I can only say is that she was in touch with her innate wisdom. And she asked me a few questions, and without rather going, oh, well, yeah, that's horrible. We've got to do something about that to stop those kids from bullying, and dragging me down to the school and complaining to the administrations and all those things. We just had a small chat. And the thing that I remember her saying was, why do you think those kids are bullying you? Now, I never looked at it that way, that there was a reason why they were bullying me. And in the outside in, I was thinking they were bullying me because I was small, because it was me. There was something I was doing that was causing the bullying. And as we discussed this more, I realized that the reason why they were bullying me was their own innocent thinking. That it was their insecurities that was causing the bullying. It wasn't me. I just happened to be in front of their insecurities. And through that conversation with my mom, I kind of got reminded that that innate resilience, that innate well-being wasn't going to be taken away from those kids bullying me. And because I knew that, there was a certain amount of inner peace and resilience that showed up. And I can honestly tell you, to this day, I don't know what happened. I know that after that talk, in a period of maybe 2 or 3 weeks, the bullying stopped. And I can't tell you a technique or a strategy that I used to get those bulliers to stop bullying me. And I don't know if it was the fact that because I understood that it was their problem, not mine, and that I understood that their bullying did not take away from my well-being, that I projected something different and I didn't give them the reaction. I don't know. So when I look at the idea of bullying, and that's a big issue, especially in this day and age, is that all the politicians and the superintendents and the school districts, to me, my experience, they're pointing into the wrong direction. They're pointing at the bulliers. They're pointing at the outside circumstance needs to be changed. And I dare say that they're looking in the wrong place. That if a bullier understood how they're experiencing life, and they understand that the reason why they're bullying is their own insecurities and their own desire to get back to that well-being. And I know that sounds really weird maybe, but I honestly believe that all behavior can be tied down to either a desire to obtain that innate well-being or a desire to protect ourselves from losing that innate well-being. And when you look at it from an outside-in paradigm, and you think there's something that I have to do to keep it, there's some implications that are going to apply. But if you look from it and from an inside-out paradigm, where you know that those are innate, that they cannot be taken away, they cannot be destroyed by any circumstance, that the only thing that keeps me in it or out of it is thought in the moment, the principle of thought. I don't know if this is resonating to any of you, but I know for me, getting a greater understanding of where I experience life from and how I experience life, that the circumstance is neutral, that no circumstance can either give me or take away from who I am as a human being, as someone with peace, someone with happiness, someone with joy, someone with well-being. And guess what? I fall asleep to that on a daily basis because it's really a big illusion. And I know that when I fall asleep to it, the only reason I fall asleep to it is I forget and think that my experience comes from anything other than thought in the moment. And when I feel anxious about my feelings and start really thinking that my feelings are important or they mean something or the feelings are telling me something about my past, as soon as I wake up to the question of where do I think my experience really is coming from, I realize I forgot. I forgot that my experience comes from thought in the moment. And I forget that I have innate well-being. And those are the times that I feel the frustration. So this week I want you to just think about that. What if feelings, all that they're telling you is where your thinking is in the moment? That's all they're telling you. It's kind of like the gauges on your car. You know, you got two gauges. You got a speedometer and you got a fuel gauge. Well, the speedometer is a very useful gauge to tell you how fast you're going, how fast the wheels are spinning. The fuel gauge is just telling you how much fuel you have. And the fuel gauge is a very bad gauge to tell you how fast you're going. And the same concept is feelings. It's just a gauge to telling you where your thinking is in the moment. It's not telling you anything else. So maybe that's what I'd like to ask you to do, is just this week, maybe share your comments with me, what you think about that idea that feelings is just a gauge of where your thinking is in the moment. And it's just telling you that it's time to back off from that particular thinking. And you don't have to do anything for the thinking to change. It'll just change naturally. And see if that resonates with you. See what your experience is. I want to hear back from you. Let me know how that resonates to you and what your experience was this week. Well, that's all I got today. And next week we'll probably go into a little bit more detail about how this thought, feelings leads to behavior and how the true source of behavior is and how behavior changes and how we can change behavior. And again, reminder, Monday, February 13th, we're going to have a little class on relationships and how understanding these principles of innateness can actually improve your relationships. So until next week, thanks a lot. Love you lots, and I will talk to you later. Thanks a lot for showing up. And please, share with your friends and hit your likes and message me. Let's start the conversation a little bit more. I'd love to hear what you're thinking. Thanks a lot. Bye.